And we're back again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. Welcome, everybody. Delightful to be here again as we continue our way through the third chapter. This one's called The Age of 100 Kings. Don't know what that's about. This is 15,000 years before the Dark Portal. So we're progressing along. Actually, it seems like it's about the same time period as before. All right, it says, though Highkeeper Ra had not been seen in millennia, his loyal mogu maintained their vigil over the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, bravely fighting off each successive mantid swarm. Their faith that the Highkeeper would one day return endured through century after century of hardships. Yet that faith vanished once the curse of flesh manifested within the mogu ranks. For the first time, the mogu faced mortality. Fear and uncertainty took root in their hearts. Small disagreements spiraled into conflict, violence, and bloodshed. Packs of mogu banded together, clans and warlords emerged by the score and engaged in brutal power struggles. Those who triumphed were quickly toppled by rivals. Through it all, their culture and language, even their sense of purpose and identity began to change. This period of turmoil and conflict became known as the Age of 100 Kings, and the mogu edged perilously close to destroying themselves from within. Only their basest instincts prevented annihilation. At the beginning of each new mantid swarm, the mogu's petty conflicts would die down. The various clans would reluctantly band together to stand against the mantid, but once the swarm had retreated, internal hostilities would surface once again. As the mogu battled the mantid, a number of other races arose in the region. Many of these creatures were drawn to the latent powers emanating from the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. Among these wondrous new races were the jinyu, fish-like mystics who dwelled in the rivers and lakes. A bold and mischievous race of monkeys known as the hozen also came to inhabit the dense jungles that encircled much of the Vale. But by far the most intelligent of these newcomers were the wise pandaren. The emergence of so much life around the Vale piqued the interest of 4 wild gods. Their names were Xuen, the wild tiger, Yulon, the jade serpent, Qiji, the red crane, and Nuzhao, the black ox. Xuen and his fellow wild gods gathered at the Vale to watch over and guide the myriad life forms that dwelled in the area. Though the warlike activities of the mogu often troubled them, the wild gods delighted in watching the other races flourish. In particular, Xuen and the other demigods developed close ties with the pandaren, in large part due to their penchant for peace. The pandaren considered the wild gods, whom they called the august celestials, to be benevolent deities. They formed a system of worship devoted to the extraordinary beings. In return, the wild gods bestowed knowledge on the pandaren, nurturing their ties to philosophy and the natural world. At the behest of the august celestials, the pandaren formed a culture that sought peace and harmony with the surrounding environment. Yet soon a new mogu leader would arise to challenge these philosophies. His name was Lei Shen, and his rule would threaten not only the mortal races of the Vale, but the august celestials as well. This is a picture of mogu defending their lands from the mantid. You can kind of see the mantid, and you can see the mogu in the back. So this shows how the mogu turned from one of the keeper races to, or the Titan Forged, or whatever they are, to the Curse of Flesh, changing them into the mogu that we know from the Mists of Pandaria expansion, and how they fought with one another, and essentially we can see how they're going to turn evil. It also gives us the jinyu, the hozen, and the pandaren, the main races of the Mists of Pandaria expansion, and one of the last playable races. So now we see there's a couple we haven't talked about. Again, we actually haven't talked about orcs at all. We haven't talked about goblins. We haven't talked about Tauren either. But for the most part, we've kind of touched on, or elves. We've touched on everything else. So there's about 4-ish races left, and the races that span off from those. But this is another big one. And it gives us the Mists of Pandaria kind of backstory. And I'm thinking the next chapter will probably continue that. We spent a lot of time on Northrend, so now let's talk about the south side of things as well. All right, guys, a pleasure as always. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining in. I hope you learned a little something on this one. Again, I did. And I will see you on the next episode. Bye.